Hi. Today we are going to talk about week 2, which is trusting God with our possessions. And specifically, I want to draw your attention to Romans 1:25, which is this. I'm going to read it to you now. They exchanged the truth of God for a lie. They worshiped and served what God had created instead of the Creator himself, who is to be praised forever. And then the rest of the study is going to be on Psalm 8. But in the teaching today, I want to draw your attention to a few other things. And a story that came to mind is from the movie or the book Jungle Book by Rudyard Kipling. And I love this movie and I loved the book when it was read to me as a child. And there's this key part in it that stood out to me. And that is that Mowgli, who's this little, they call him a man cub. He was a boy that was lost in the jungle as a baby, and he was raised by the wolves, by the animals around him. And he always wanted to be like the animals. But he could never be like the animals because there were some distinct differences. And one of the key differences that's highlighted in the movie is that he, as a human, has the capability of creating tools. And the tools help him to do things and function in a way that gives him strength over other animals, even animals that are faster and stronger and have other instincts that are better than his. What makes him elevated in the hierarchy of animals is his ability. One of the things is his ability to make tools. And I highlight that because oftentimes we forget that we were created to enjoy the things around us, to enjoy nature, to enjoy our possessions. And it's a great and beautiful thing that we have things, that we have objects, that we have ownership of things. And one of the reasons is because we can make useful things out of the objects around us. So the reason this ties in philosophically is I want us to remember that what we have been given in the natural world, in the material world, and things that we can touch and see and feel are good. The material world is good. I'm not saying it's not good. And it's good because we are designed and created by our Creator to use the world around us to bring order out of chaos, to make things useful, to bring about beauty. But this thing happens along the way where that innate desire in us that makes us distinctly human somehow gets shifted, and we start to elevate our possessions, the things around us, the material world, to a higher place than it ought to be. In short, we start to worship and idolize and elevate out of proportion the material world around us. We worship that which is created rather than the creator. And I find one of the reasons I do that, and I'll tell you a quick story, is that in some weird way, I believe that there is going to be some kind of life found in whatever that thing is I'm obsessed with or that I want. And just to bring it down to like everyday life, I want to tell you, when I was raising my kids when they were younger, I had this good friend. She no longer is around in Richmond, but I had kind of a mom crush on her because everything she did was just so lovely and just seemed so put together. And it wasn't over the top and it wasn't showy. And it was just sort of exactly the slice of the vibe that I wanted to be as a mom. And her girls had these gorgeous white, crisp white cotton nightgowns. And I wanted to find out where they were from. And they were clearly not from like the Gap or, Old Navy, something like that. You just couldn't find them. And it was pre-internet. So I ended up asking her one day and she gave me the name brand. And I found out that they were from some like boutique, old fashioned nightgown place in England. So for Christmas that year, this took a lot of work for me to figure this out. I asked my daughter was little, that she be given one of those nightgowns for Christmas from her grandparents. And her grandmother was kind of like, would she really like that? But in my mind, let me tell you why these nightgowns felt so important to me, is they represented so much more than the nightgown. They represented the type of family I wanted my family to be. They represented the type of mother I wanted to be, the type of daughter. They had a little bit of a Sound of Music vibe to them. And I always watched The Sound of Music growing up, and I thought, oh, we're going to run in the hills and be free and be natural and also look elegant. And this one little nightgown, to me, even though I couldn't have articulated it at the time, had so much life in it. It had the life that I dreamed of having. And so the nightgown came and was given to her for Christmas. And pretty quickly, we forgot about it. It changed nothing about our life. And it got some like ink stains on it that I couldn't get out. We threw it out. Overpriced nightgown that meant nothing. The point isn't whether I got the nightgown or not. The point is that I had wasted a lot of time and money obsessing about the nightgown. And it's a small story of how when we worship objects, they can become our master. And as our master, they fall short, and they make us fall short of all that we were created to be. And that there is no life in the created things. Life is found in our Creator, who gives us creative things to use. And so we are supposed to be sort of the master over things. And that happens when we worship God, not the things, not the material world. So this really came home to me. And this is the thing that it like gets me in my gut when I think about it. At Easter, I had the opportunity at a local church to do a Stations of the Cross walk. And when I was going through the Stations of the Cross, I came to this part, and it's one verse in Luke 23:34. It says this: "Then Jesus said, 'Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing.' And they cast lots to divide his clothing." Let me read that again, because this is in one verse. We have these two things next to each other. Jesus is dying on the cross, and he says, "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing." And they cast lots to divide his clothing. It was in one sentence. And what struck me in a new way that I'd never seen before is that God in flesh, in the form of Jesus, the Son of God, they crucified him. He was dying on the cross, and he was offering forgiveness. And all that they saw was his clothes that were available. And they were dividing them up, casting lots to see who gets them. You have to put yourself in an ancient mindset where clothes weren't impossible to find, but they were valuable because fabric wasn't as readily available. And so they weren't like enormously valuable, but they wanted his old, bloodied, beaten up clothes more, and were preoccupied with that more than being aware of like divine love in front of them, offering forgiveness and life through his body broken for them. And that just like seared into my heart when I was walking through the Stations of the Cross. And it just made me remember and try to remember that when I'm going through my life and something happens where it's like an obsession with material possessions hooks me. It's like a fish. It hooks me in the side of my cheek, in my jowl, and starts dragging me. It's like mastering me. Like I really need this. This is going to make my life better. I need a new kitchen. I need all these things. And then my life will be better. It reminds me to look up and to see Jesus on the cross, because Jesus is where there is life. Jesus is the source of love. Jesus is the source of forgiveness and liberation from our sins. And nothing that has been created is going to give us that life, no matter how much we believe that little white nightgown that reminds me of the sound of music and that way of life. No matter how much we believe that's going to change our life, it isn't. And so I just would love for you guys, as you read through, to note that the worship of children and infants is what establishes a stronghold against the enemy. And just consider how worshiping the material objects doesn't help us deliver us from our enemies. It doesn't give us life. And remember that scene from the Passion of the Cross where Jesus says, "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing." And they cast lots to divide his clothing. All right, have a great discussion.